Well, good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Kahuna Help. So, this afternoon, as my screen comes to life, hoping you can hear me just fine. It looks like you can. What are we doing this afternoon? Well, we're doing some world building. I'm working on the Synergasia project still. I was also going to do a little bit of map making to show you my process for making the maps for Synergasia. You can actually see some of the progress here. I do it in multiple stages. So I wanted to show you how I take a master map and build the smaller regions out of it. I like doing it that way because even on my own world, not the shared world of Synergasia, but on my own world, I can build out the entire world as a base map, and then as I go into a region, I tighten it up. Oh, look out! It looks like the raiders are here. Here they come. I am prepared for boarding. Please, please, come aboard. Welcome, Dazzlycat. Welcome, DM Stretch. Rowan. Welcome, Esong. Welcome. Aloha. Welcome, everybody, from Sable Stream. Thank you so much for the raid, Aaron and Sable. Really appreciate it. We're going to have, today I'm going to do some stuff. I am not prepared. I am always prepared. Prepared for what we don't know. Welcome all. And thank you again, Sable and Aaron, for the raid. I was just getting started and I was talking about one of the things I want to try to get to today is show you guys how I'm building the maps for Synergasia. This is that, you ordered yourself a green screen last night. Yes! It's a lot easier to do than the people think. This is, you know, I got fancy the way I hung it in here because, you know, we have to use this as a guest room too, but, you're going to have fun with the green screen. Synergasia is the collaborative world, and each region, it will be a different writer. But here's the thing. We want to have one map for the entire world, but each region can change in its interior. Meaning, we're going to give people a base geography, but if they say, well, I need a river here, or I need a lake here, we'll do that. So how do I build this huge map, but allow for the regions to change? So that's when we get into how I do my map making. I think it's a little different than some folks because it allows for, well, technically it's almost like an agile world building for map making, which is I create the areas as they're needed while setting them on a base map that lets us know what the entire world is going to look like. So let me go over to my drawing app here real quick. And let's turn it on. And there we go. So how do I start with this? Well, first thing I do is I go in and let me turn everything off so you can see where I start. And actually, let me turn off merged regions and the regions and these extra little mountains that have shown up because I haven't done that yet. Okay, so what I start with, I start in Wonderdraft. Wonderdraft is very easy to create base landforms. It's got a great procedural generation tool that lets you pick archipelagos or continents or an entire world. You choose how the base construction does, and then it randomizes and creates your shorelines and everything else. So that's where I start from. And what I got out of Wonderdraft WonderDraft lets you export in layers, so that you get a separate layer for the ocean, a separate layer for land masses, and if you have drawn a grid, it'll send you a separate grid, and if you have lines drawn on it, it's a separate image for that. They're all PNGs, all transparent, so it's very easy to layer them on top of each other. So all I really use it for is the oceans and the land masses. So once I've got something in WonderDraft, I think, okay, this is what I want the shape of the landforms to be. Then I export that out as layers. So the first layer I get, that's not what I wanted. What the? Hang on here. Why are you not behaving? Oh, because that's under land masses. So the first layer I get, let me turn off regions. Oh, that's why, because it's doing all of it at once, because they're all selected. Okay, so the first layer I get is the ocean. Pretty simple. It's a base ocean. You can change this to whatever you want. Okay, this is one of the ones that's actually randomly generated within WonderDraft. So I use that. The next thing is the next layer, which is the land masses. Those two layers are basically all I use WonderDraft for. That's it. Okay, so almost any mapping software is going to do this for you. So I use WonderDraft, but you can use whatever you like. I'm hoping when Deos comes out, and that's the Dungeon Fog / World Anvil partnership, I'm hoping when Deos comes out, it will do the same thing, because that's all I use the mapping software for. Everything after that, I do in Affinity, which is what you see here, which is actually a photo editing package. I got it fairly cheap not too long ago for all three of the Affinity drawing programs. So I start from here. So the next thing I needed to do was decide, okay, and Dinosaur Bob and I kind of went back and forth on this a few times, on exactly where I wanted the climates to be, because that's the next thing you really need to think about is your climate is going to dictate a lot of what happens in a region. Is it a hot climate? Is it a wet climate? Is it a cold climate? That's going to be dictated. Now, because of the way we've designed Synergasia, it's not like the Earth that travels around the sun tilted so that hemispheres have flipped seasons. It stays parallel to its sun, and so therefore everybody's in summer or everybody's in winter, because it's based on how far away from the sun they are, as opposed to the axis. So once we had decided that, then we came up with the climate gradients, which look like this. So you can see in the middle of it, there's a lot more of the orangey area to yellow. Those would be the hotter areas. And near the top and bottom, we get into the blue and white, which would be the colder Arctic areas. And it's a gradation between them. So this, right off the bat, we can look at and say, okay, now we know where things are. Now, yellow does not, or orange does not necessarily mean dry. We could decide, good night, Esong, thank you for coming by. Have a great night and a great game. So the orange areas could be hot and dry, but they also could be warm and wet. So they could be jungle, so thick, dense jungle, or they could be barren, dry, arid areas. So this just tells us where those areas would be. You wouldn't want one of those barren, hot, dry areas up where it's blue or white. It doesn't make any sense. So that was the second step, was this. Once we had that, I said, okay, looking at this, what would make sense in terms of the geological aspects. We're not in Kahuna quiet, Maui. Maui's getting all confused. The geological aspects, you don't have to necessarily worry about when you are when you're planning. I mean, it's something we did because it helps for me. It helps build the structure of the world and why things should be in certain places. Why are mountains in certain places? Why are island chains in certain places? So, for example, what I did was I thought about where tectonic lines would be here and what that would do in terms of creation. So the next thing I did here was I added tectonic lines. There are two different lines on this screen, two different sets of lines. The ones in the oceans are the plate edges where the Earth is moving away. DM Stretch says, or asks, do we have weather cells that could dictate the weather in certain areas? Once you see the geology, once we've built up the mountains and everything, absolutely. For example, one thing that I have tried to do as I'm building this is we're going with the assumption just put out there that weather would travel from the left of the screen to the right or from the west to the east, as it does in the northern hemisphere on Earth. And again, because we don't have a tilt the axis, it's generally going to be a similar movement because the Earth is heated equally as opposed to unequally. So I hope that makes sense. And that's just a base reasoning. And again, we can do whatever we want. Your world, your rules. However you want weather to go is fine. And you'll see a little later when I start showing you how I put in mountains and how I started doing the shading, how I worked in the idea of weather traveling from one side to the other. So yes, in a way we've done that. Now, once you have your own region, once you have been assigned a region and you're working on it, you can choose how the weather happens there. You can choose, how it affects the area. That's up to you. For example, I haven't set how tall mountains are. I've just said there's mountains here. Well, if there's shorter mountains, they don't affect the weather as much. Tall mountains create very wet areas on one side and very dry areas on the other because they basically scrape the moisture out. That's like the Sierra Nevadas here in California. West of that, very green, and in fact is, the agricultural breadbasket pretty much of the United States with so much the agriculture, in that area, in the Central Valley, because they're west of the Sierras. East of the Sierras, it's arid. It's desert. And the only thing separating them is, the tallest mountains on the continental U.S. Very much like the UK. Yeah, west is wetter than the east. Exactly. As things travel from west to east, the moisture is just slowly drained off. But you don't really have deserts in the UK because there's nothing tall enough to really completely scrape that moisture out. So it's what I was talking about in the in the first part of that. Okay, so created these tectonic lines. So again, going between the continents in the oceans are the areas where the tectonic plates are actually separating. So this would cause deep rifts in the ocean floor. It would be areas where magma could make its way to the surface much more easily, which is why you'll get island chains along those areas. Not all the time, but most of the time you will. So we actually have an island chain that we're almost right there in the middle. And that's actually one region, is those islands, is there because that is the deepest rift on the planet. It's the area that has opened up the most, has the deepest rifts in there, and has the most activity. The other lines, the ones on the actual land masses, those would be areas where the press from continental drift has started to push. In other words, things are coming in from those rifts and pushing in and pushing up. Or it could be a subduction zone where one's pushing up and the other one's pushing under. But that's where those lines occur. So, you know, that's how we came up with this, or how I came up with where things were. Is I looked at, okay, if at this particular zone things are separating, then there needs to be probably someplace where the pressure from two plates is crushing. And it could be multiple places. In fact, in the biggest area, which is there towards the upper left, you'll see that there are actually a number of ridges that would technically be from pushing things together. Yeah, I actually went into that, and I wanted to have reasons, DM Stretch, for why things are there. So they kind of made sense. Are they 100% geologically accurate? Oh, heck no. No. But they're rough approximations so that when I start to fill this out, it makes sense. Now, remember, the whole reason I did it this way is because I want to have a base map to work from. You'll notice there's no regions here. There's nothing set up yet. My next step, after the tectonic lines and dropping in an equator, was to say, okay, well, what about where mountains would be? Well, obviously, since I've already put those tectonic lines where things are smooshing, then the next thing I put in is mountain ranges. And you can see the mountain ranges are basically along where those tectonic lines are. So if I take out the actual tectonic lines, you'll see what's left is those mountain ranges. Now, these were rough, relatively hand-drawn mountain ranges just to give me an idea of what things were looking like. I tried to extend them into areas that made sense. So, for example, on longer, thinner landforms, we've got ones that run almost the length of them. The other reason I was adding them was they're on those tectonic lines, but I also want to create areas of interest. There are a couple areas where a part of a region could be completely surrounded by mountains, completely protected. Places where a volcano might be a great thing to have, or likely to have. You know, there's one way up in the top right there where the top of the landform is more Arctic, but it gets into that slightly temperate area on the south end of that landform, and it's divided by a mountain range. So think of what the opportunities are for telling stories. And that was one of the things I wanted to do here, was come up with ways to additionally tell stories based on the nature of the land around it. Because again, we could have as many as 25 authors on this one world. We need to give people ways to tell stories. So now this was my base. Now I have an area where I can say, okay, I think I can split this up now. This base here will not change. This is the rule of how we do things. After this, things change. So now what I did was I created another level of the map, and those are the regions. Now, as you can see, what I did when I separated these regions was to create areas that had their own levels of interest within them. For example, the bottom left, you have something that kind of looks like the Big Island of Hawaii. I created a mountain range that is semicircular, and gosh, wouldn't it be great if there was a giant, massive mega volcano on it? Stay tuned. We have other areas, for example, down in the center at the bottom. That's a subarctic area going slightly into a temperate zone. where the region is actually separated by a sea. So what do you do with that region where you've got two different sections separated by a sea? Are they all the same people? Are they different people? What do you want? You know, you can do what you want with that. To the right of that, you'll find another one where it's a very thin landmass, but they have also claimed 3 other island areas farther to the east. Those are all part of the same region. Great for, say, an age of sail. In the center, as I said, there's an island chain. That's going to be another age of sail area. We even had a request just above that, and you'll see one little island in the middle of a larger sea. That is going to be dedicated to an undersea area with a very small landmass actually above the ocean. And we can add more of those if we need to, if we have a whole lot of demand for that. So we can change the space map, but the regions that are set now are set. We can add regions by just adding them there and adding landmass if we need to. But the base landforms are there. We're not going to rearrange continents at this point. But again, you'll see some regions, for example, where one or more of their borders are mountain ranges. Perfectly normal to have mountain ranges, right? Because especially you can consider those might be tall mountain ranges, very difficult to pass, and so therefore a natural barrier. Aloha, Barbarossa. You also have other areas, for example, where there is no physical barrier, like just to, there's 2 regions there between the 2 larger land masses there towards the top left. There's a line there, but there is no physical barrier. What do those 2 regions do about that border? Well, that's up to the authors. But we wanted to create some areas where there was no physical border. It still spins, but doesn't tilt. Correct. So yes, there's day and night. It has a roughly 360-day period around its sun. But it does not spin, so everybody gets the same season at the same time, and the weather or the seasons are set by distance from the sun in its orbit around the sun. So the whole idea was to try to create different types of storytelling opportunities just by the region. You're not marked on Senegaziel. I will take care of that. Should have been. Interesting. Give me 1 second here and we'll take care of that right quick. And let's see. So, I think you guys get kind of where we're going with the... Oops. I'll take care of that in a little bit there, Rabbit. I don't want to... You were in Discord, but only marked as online. Okay, let me actually take care of that now. I apologize. Let me... Members... Where are you? Let's see. Rabbit, there you are. My apologies. I just did not get you set up. All right, Rabbit, you are all set. You are in. Dazzly, I think I've got you set up in there, so you should be good. Let's see. Darth, welcome, by the way. I didn't see you sneak in. Okay, so I drew out all these lines. So what do I do now? I have these areas, but you know, if I take off the layer that's the climate gradients, well, that's boring. So here's how I do this, and this is how I do it in Affinity. I believe you can do pretty much the same thing in Photoshop. and I believe you can still do the same thing in GIMP. This is literally just playing with layers. Although Affinity's got one feature, and I think Photoshop has it as well, that GIMP does not necessarily. Well, actually, it might. Where it makes the next step very easy. So what if I'm going to draw the area? If I'm going to put in the detail for an area, what's the easiest way to do that? Kahuna, I have a question. Do you think it may be in poor taste to mention genocide in a dark, low fantasy world? Considering the elves were a rare sight in my world because of genocidal tendencies by the old human empire. Why is it in poor taste? I think it might be in poor taste if it was a glorified genocide. By the same token, genocide it's in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, if you think a particular group is evil, you may want to kill them. I'm not saying genocide's a good thing, but it's in the eye of the beholder. So I don't think it's poor taste. I think it has to be treated properly so that it doesn't seem that that all you're doing is saying, genocide, it's the answer. I like exactly what Daz said there. Yeah, it's a dark truth in your history. This is something that was, you can easily put it as there's a group that was doing this. This is why they stopped. They realized the error of it, or they were stopped by someone else. But that's what it is. It's not an error to put in dark information or dark history. It's an error to glorify it, I think. It should always be taken in context. Does that make sense? I hope so. And anybody who disagrees with me, please do. Because I will say that I'm kind of here on that one. Do you include, I don't have a problem including genocide, but I speak about it in a certain way that clearly makes sense that, no, this was a bad thing. But I also know there is the storytelling precept that good or evil are simply in the eyes of the beholder. Are any of these areas already taken? Actually, no area is taken yet. What we have asked folks to do is go to the We Want You page, and let me put that up. We're asking people to go to this page, and all the instructions on how to get in on this are there. Basically, the first prompt that we are supplying is, tell us about what you'd want in this world. It's basically a 5 bullet point thing. We're asking you to write an article in your own world on how this works. We're not turning anybody away. You come on in. Sure. Tell us what you're looking for, and then what we do is, Bob and I have been compiling all the different requests. We've got 10 so far. We're sorting them out into the eras, the technological eras that they're involved with, and the genre. So we don't stick things that are completely dissimilar together next to each other. We want to try to have collaboration between regions. It may happen that we have things that go haywire, but then that makes for other stories. I demand a meritocratic merchant republic powered by guilds and locales of power. So write that article. Do it. All we're doing when it comes to assigning regions is looking at what your requests are and seeing how we can accommodate that geographically, and to surround you with others of similar eras or of close enough eras that at some point, if you guys want to collaborate, you can. So there's cross-regional collaboration, because I think that's a real interesting making me work. How dare you, sir? Well, I dare very well, sir. So we're just, you are, the world or the region is yours. We will assign these, we will start assigning them on September 8th. We're actually going to do kind of a fun event on the 10th to announce them on stream. Bob and I will be getting together, and if all works out, we'll be both on both on Scream. We will be both on stream simultaneously, and this is kind of going to be like a sports draft when we announce it. It will be fun. It's one of the reasons I'm working to create each of the regions' maps individually so that we can display the maps as they are assigned. So we won't assign them for another week yet. We won't start assigning them. And at that point, we will look at who we have at that point and go. Anybody who comes in after that point, we'll fit them in the best that we can. If for some reason we get more than 25, we are simply going to copy this map and create a second world, an alternate Synergasia, and let everybody else start playing that world. And then we can talk about, alternate universe crossovers, because that's fun. Okay, so as I was saying, the map as you see it right now is not terribly exciting. So how do we do that? Well, so I'm going to show you. I'm working on region 14 now. I've gotten through the first 13. I'm working on region 14 now. So what I do is I come over, and over here in the layers tool, or layers, what do you want to call it? Screen, toolbar, panel, that's what it is. I select the areas that I'm really going to need. Now, I did create a legend up here. You can see it says 1,000 miles and 5,000 miles. It's important that when I do this, I import those at the same size that I import the region that I'm going to be editing. That's the way I keep everything consistent as I'm working. So, what I do is I select the layers that I need. So I need that 1,000 layer one, or 1,000 mile one. I need the mountain ranges that I'm showing there. For this particular region, I do need the equator because it will show. I need the tectonic lines, and I need the land masses. Now, for my own reference, I'm turning on the gradients just for a second so I can see this area I'm going to be working on, which is region 14, is roughly in the temperate to hot area. So I need to keep that in mind, and it should be easy to remember that because, well, the equator is nearby. So now I've picked all those. I'm also going to select the ocean. From here, I can right-click, tell it to copy, and this is the feature that makes my job a lot easier when I create the regions. Under File, there is a New from Clipboard. All those layers I just copied, when I hit New from Clipboard, a new one is created with just those layers. I forgot a layer. Don't ask what Synergasia can do for you. Ask for you what you can do for Synergasia. That is correct. And I'm doing plenty. The one thing I forgot to bring in there was the region, so I can actually copy and paste that in as well. Oops. Wrong place. Paste. All right, so there are the regions. So that's essentially what I had on the other screen, right? Here's what I had showed you originally, and now here's the new screen. It looks pretty much identical. So now, I know that region 14 is the area I need, which is this. Before I do anything to this map, I'm going to move that 1,000-mile marker over. That is not what I intended to do. I'm going to move the 1,000-mile marker over here near region 14. Now, I take the crop tool, and I literally crop down right to that region. Again, I'm not working with a whole lot of data here because I didn't bring in a whole lot of layers with a whole lot of detail. Once I do this, bang, that is the area I'm working on, and you can see there, the region right in the middle, that's my region that I'm working on. And now you can kind of see the importance of why that 1,000-mile marker is there. So now we can see that that's 1,000 miles across. This is a little more than 1,000 miles across. That helps you in measuring if you need to. Fairly easy to do. Now, you can see this is kind of pixelated. Well, it's pixelated because I'm bringing it in and magnifying it from its original size. Right now, it's sitting at about 265% of size. I haven't added any real detail here that I'm worried about, so I can upsize this without a problem. If this was an actual photo, upsizing it from this would cause loss. It would make it look fuzzy at the minimum. It might fix the pixelation, but it's going to look fuzzy. But in this case, there's nothing here that anybody's going to say, oh, that little corner's wrong, because it's all made up. So the next thing I do is I go to the document. I say resize it. And the first thing I do is, this is at 96 DPI. I tell it to go to 300. That immediately triples the size in both directions. So now instead of 300 pixels in one direction, it's now 900. And this makes it very easy, a lot smoother to work with. I think that's probably a big enough size for me to work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to resize. I try to make it at least 1,000 pixels in one direction because of what I'm going to do later. It makes it easier to work with. I were to ask for a spot of the Delian League. That's perfect. A spot of the Delian League. Okay, that's one I don't know. I will fully admit when I don't know, and I don't know. Okay, now you can see immediately, as soon as I did that, 1,000 miles has resampled. Now it looks clean. And the edges look fairly clean. They do look a little fuzzy, as I said. But we're not even close to done with this. All right, so that's the first thing. So now we have an area that looks like the map of the region. The next thing I do is I go in and I actually delete most of these region lines. Why? I don't need them for this local map. I just need the ones that separate this country on land from other regions. So for example, I don't need the one, oops, pick the right landmass here. Oh, come on, there we go. So, oh, that's not what I wanted either. I wanted regions. Come on, there we go. So now, I'm going to go through and start deleting the lines off the region. Okay, and now you can see, well, now I can see the coastline really well. But I'm not going to delete this line down here. Why? That separates it from this region. That separates it from that region. So these lines around here, whoop, these lines around here stay because that separates it out. And I go ahead and delete the extraneous lines. And there are easier ways to do this. I'll show you one in a second. I like doing the connection areas by hand first. But then what I can do is I can do a mass, more of a mass delete. So I pick the freehand selection tool. Whoops, come on. And I select all of this area where the regions are. That wasn't exactly what I wanted, but kind of does the trick. My computer is running a little slow. I have priced out what a new computer is going to cost me, and I may have to deal with slow for a while. So I deleted everything in that selection. I cancel the selection, and now I do that again. I should be able to get the rest of the regions cleaned up fairly quickly. Bang. Now I just have that. This next step is not necessary, but I do it because it makes the map look better to me. I use that same tool I just had, but I switch over to the land masses layer, and I basically create an outline of this region. Notice that the island above and to the left of this region is not part of this region. So I go through and outline this whole thing. I'm not lightning fast because I'm old. And I don't have surgeon's hands. I do this on a tablet, by the way. I've tried doing this with a mouse. Forget about it. Not nearly as accurate, not nearly as much control. All right, so there we go. So now what I do is, I've got that line drawn, and I invert the selection. What that means is right now I've selected the region. What I want is everything except for the region. So you go into select, invert pixel selection, and now all of the map except for the region is selected. And now I can go in and do, excuse me, an image adjustment. Now what I have already set this up. But basically all I'm doing here is I'm going to darken the areas that are not part of the region so that they kind of fade into the background. Barbarossa, if you like to look more on the mouse, that's great. Do it. Whatever works for you. I find that the pen works for me and that with the tablet because mice require too much motion to move. And the pen, I can do very small movements. And the other thing is, it doesn't roll on me. So if I set the pen in one place, it's there. Also, I've gotten very good. My tablet is calibrated to the monitor that I work on, and only that monitor. It doesn't work on the other two monitors. It only works on that monitor, and it's corner to corner. So if I pick the middle of the tablet, it's the middle of the monitor. And that really, really helps me in the drawing, and it's natural. It's like drawing on paper for me. In fact, it's probably a little easier. Okay, so like I was saying, what I do is I darken the areas that are not part of the region. I actually created a preset in Affinity for this, but you can do this manually just by adjusting the brightness. And that's literally what I did was this preset. It just takes the brightness of the areas around the region down once it kicks in. There it goes. Great. So now you see the region is highlighted. Much easier to work with. At this point, I can go ahead and take that selection off. I can deselect it. And now you have just the region. All right. So I have the tectonic lines in. I have the mountains in. Let me make sure let me turn the tectonic lines on. All right. So now, if you look, you can see that there are actually 3 sets of tectonic lines and the equator. The equator goes across here in the middle. The line over here to the right, that is a set of tectonic lines, which if you look carefully, you'll see that there are mountains along that ridge. Makes sense, right? There's a small mountain range up here in this island. We're not going to mess with that because that's a different region. We don't need to know that. Just like out here, that's an ocean rift. We don't need to mess with that. It's in a different region. Okay, so we're only worried about what's in this region. At this point, it's also where I turn off the region lines, because now I can see the region by itself. And like I said, you can see that there are no real physical borders here other than the mountain range to the east. To the north and to the south, this is open land. Okay? And remember, there along the equator, that's probably going to be hot. Now, remember what we talked about when it came to weather. Because of where it is, this is likely to be wetter rather than drier, because it's off the ocean. The storms come in off the ocean. Think of the west coast of Africa, very dense jungles, right? To the north. If you're thinking to the south, things switch. Same thing in South America. The dense jungles are along one side. There's almost nothing on the other side. And again, weather patterns. But here, all weather patterns move from west to east, so it makes sense that the area here along the edge is going to be wetter. So my next step is I'm going to draw in the mountains. By the way, if you're using Affinity, or actually if you're using almost anything at this point, I'm going to show you some brushes that I have created. If you would like those brushes, let me know. I absolutely can put them up for you, because they're. I'll create an asset page in Synergasia if you want them. They make my life so much easier, and they could make yours a lot easier too. So for mountains, I created a custom brush that is basically 8 different mountain configurations, and some are just rotated or flipped, but they're 8 different mountain configurations in a PNG format. Next in the Cologne line, yes, brush. And it allows me as a brush to just literally just kind of come down and stroke along the lines that I want the mountains, and it just randomly puts these ridges in. So that's how I start it. And I create a separate pixel layer, a new layer. I just moved to the top. And on that layer, I'm going to go in and draw my mountains. So I pick up one of the brush tools. I set it to a size that's going to work for me, usually around 65, 75 pixels. Make sure I've got that brush. And now I just start to draw in the mountains. And I like to wiggle it back and forth I like to increase the density of these mountains. These are going to be smaller, less descript mountains. Whoops. That's okay. A little bit of a pop. And you see the mountains end down here. Once my computer catches up with me. There we go. All right. Was that a little overboard? Yep. So I can go back in. Not a big deal. Go in and just delete those mountains. The extras. Yeah, that looks kind of straight. That's okay. Next step. I also have created assets. I know Photoshop does this. GIMP, this is one of the things that made me move from GIMP, is GIMP, at least as of 6 months ago, did not have a great way of dealing with assets. At least not one that I liked. This one's awesome. An asset is any image or any piece of something, a line or something that you have created that you want to reuse over and over again. In these assets I created, from those same images that I created the brush from, I have the separate mountain assets. And as you can see, this has got kind of a curve, a kind of a banana-shaped curve. I actually have one of these mountain ranges that has a banana-shaped curve to it. So I just drag it over, and it's probably a little short for this. So what I can do is, first, I want to rotate it so it's about the right angle. Yeah, that's looking good. I'll bring it over, set it into that mountain range, and now I will simply just extend it up till it covers the area I want to cover. Extend it over. And, slight adjustments. But there you go. I've now put in a mountain range. Again, not real difficult. You can see how it works. I can futz with this all day long. For example, if I want to move this mountain range so that, whoops, not that. If I want to move this mountain range, come on, so that this ridge is sitting right on there, I can do that. Another tool I can use is the warping tool. The warping tool lets you modify the box that that's in and twist and shape it even a little better. So here, you see, now that I move this in here, this side's kind of out, this side's kind of out, I can actually take a corner here and start to pull it. I said start to pull it. There we go. Until that ridge sits along where I want it to. Same thing up here. I can pull this over. Now you see when I did that, it pulled this section here. Well, I can then go here. And I can adjust that to my heart's delight until it looks right. I'm happy with that. So now we have a mountain range. After the mountain range, I want to put in the tectonic line that actually describes that mountain range. Again, on my very first region, I created a tectonic line. All I have to do with this is exactly what I did with the mountains. And you can see it's actually about the same shape as that mountain range. Drag it over. And again, I like to put the top one in its place and then drag the bottom to the bottom. And in this case, because it's a line, we're going to use the node edit tool, which kind of moves the points on the line. So I can just touch here, create a new spot to drag it from, bring it over. And then I can use the handles here to adjust the curve of that line to match my ridge line. And again, this part does not have to be exact, because Mother Nature's not exact. Just get it close enough so that you can reasonably say, this is how things worked. A little bit too much there. Come on. There we go. And we'll drag this over. We'll drag this over to here. And it's automatically trying to smooth the line, which is what I want. I want this to look like a contiguous line and not a bunch of broken lines. Oh, let's drag that. All right, so that's roughly along the line of the ridge. Yes, doggos. Doggos are downstairs barking at each other because they can. All right, so now I have the tectonic line. I have the mountain range. All that's really left at this point is to color this in. So again, here I use this is a more standard brush. It's actually comes in under textures, and it's just a kind of uneven brush texture. Let me make it big and you can see what the shape of it is. Brush. There we go. Oh, let's make it much bigger than that. Ooh, not quite that big. All right, so that's the basic shape of that brush. So it's uneven. It's got some heavier areas, got some areas where it doesn't hit at all. Who decides the name of the mountains? The person with the region. So mountains could have two different sets of names depending on what side of the mountain you're on. You could look at that tall mountain and say it's, Mount Rainier, and somebody else says, no, it's something else. You choose it. Oh, by the way, Barbarossa, I'm sorry you weren't aware. Today is terrible typing Tuesday, so you are completely absolved of any responsibility. Tuesdays are terrible typing Tuesday, and any mistakes made are entirely to the blame of the cosmos. We determined that earlier when nobody could type. Okay, so let me reduce this size again. So the first color I like to put in is a deeper green. And I like the deeper green because that's generally what you would find up against the mountains. So, again, remember, we're going from left to right. So the moisture's coming in, it's hitting these mountains, it goes up the mountains, and the clouds are squeezed of their moisture, so it's going to be down this side. And so I just simply go in, and that's the wrong color. By the way, the undo is your friend. All right, so now I go in. You see, it doesn't draw it very heavily to start. I have it set to flow very lightly, about 12%. And that's so I can layer this in as I need to and do it fairly randomly. So, as you can see, I'm laying the heavier color right along this side of the mountain ridge. It is a challenge to do this when the computer is slow because, you know, it doesn't quite go in. And once I've gotten it out a bit, you still got your big demo splotch on the ocean. Oh, you are correct. I didn't undo enough. Why you not delete? Why you not delete? Oh, there it goes. It's just slow. Yeah, I probably could have just encircled this with a selection, but selection is working awfully slow too. All right. So I put that first deeper color in. Then I come in with a slightly lighter color and blend into it and come out towards the ocean. It would be reasonable in this type of landform to believe that this center section would be agricultural. All that rain that comes in and hits those mountains has to go somewhere, right? But you notice I haven't put any rivers on here. That is going to be a decision by the author who gets this region. And that will be the case in every region. You decide where the rivers are going to go. If you want ones that make no sense, I don't care. That's up to you. You got to decide to explain it. But as a rule, the rivers start in the mountains and work their way to the ocean. So in this case, it would be more likely that you would have rivers running from east to west towards the ocean. There's a couple little places here, a couple little indents that would make perfect places for rivers to empty into the ocean. Now you notice I'm staying kind of away from this area near the equator. That I'm actually going to put in a mixture of colors. First one's going to be kind of this yellowish. Yeah, I'm on top of the equator. That's okay. It's kind of just a yellow, pale yellowish color. And this is entirely up to you when you're mapping. Do what looks good to your eye. Love a little bit too perfect for major trade. Absolutely. And there's 2 islands out there. So, you know, if you want to do Age of Sail, you got 2 islands where pirates can hang out. Just off the coast of the trade city. I'd like to say that that was totally intentional, but it is not. Those were landforms that were created randomly. All right, so I go back to that green I had earlier. And I'm going to layer that on top of that yellow. So we get a slightly different look. It's the same green as up here. We get a slightly different look to it because it's mottled in with the yellow. And then right along the coast, I'm going to go pretty heavy. Again, why? Rain comes in. Think of the Pacific Northwest in the United States, or the west coast of Britain. The rain comes in, and it gets pretty heavy in terms of rainfall. Ah, yes, I really need a new computer. It's very slow to do this. And then the area in the middle, I'm going to go with a very light green. And that could be an agricultural area. And I try to fill in most of the gaps unless I'm intentionally leaving an area barren. I try to fill in most of the gaps. Now that looks just really darned messy, doesn't it? Well, one thing is I'm going to move it below the mountains I created. Now the mountains are on top. Be a little better. Oops. I moved it literally under the mountains. There we go. Oh, goodness. There we go. All right, so the mountains are on top, so now you can see the detail of the mountains. And then I'm going to go and clean up that mess. So I just use an erase tool. So now I'm going to go ahead and erase those areas that stuck out. My offspring is excited about something. You can say it on stream. And
I got the time slot and I got permission and I'm going to get to do my game.
So, offspring number 3 here is going to be DMing for the first time this weekend. And they got the time slot they wanted. They're doing it on Discord. And so offspring number 3 is very, very excited that they are going to be DMing this weekend for the first time. So congratulations. Cool.
I'm going to go tell Donna.
Okay, I'm going to go map now.
Have fun.
Thanks. Welcome to the Kahuna household. They are very, very excited. They had never played a D&D game before last December when I took them to a local shop that was doing one-shots every other weekend. And she kind of, I should say, got kind of, it was like, yeah, it's okay, Dad, whatever. And now they're going to DM their own deal. So that's very fun for them. I actually kind of looked over the adventure that they had planned for their players, and 10 people enter, 10 people leave. Yes, but it's not the same 10. Okay, so I've cleaned that up. So now if I pull back, we're getting better on how it looks. Okay, so that's a lot cleaner. There's little things that need to be done. For example, the equator needs to be put above the mountains because it's above everything else. My region is still there. So if I click region and turn it on, you'll see it's still there. I can actually put that above everything as well. And we're almost done. 2 more pieces that I have pre-made are a label, which I just go in and edit to add the appropriate label number. And then I have a legend for the lines. Now, we don't have any tectonic rifts listed here, but we do have the tectonic ridges. My goodness, that's big. So we're just going to shrink it. Oops, I did the wrong one. We're going to shrink it. And then those lines just look awful big. So I can go in to those individually. And these actually, I have them set to display at, they'll look right when they're 2.5 points. So now that looks right. And tectonic ridges, the mountain ridges, I do the same thing. I change that to 2.5 points. And now that looks a lot like what I want to see. And that is basically it. I can adjust spacing a little bit. And I've created my region. Custom adventure pre-written. It is pre-written because they have their own world that is comic book based. So a lot of the things that happen are modified by comic book rule, or cartoon rules, not comic book, cartoon. So, you know, when someone suddenly runs off, there's a puff of smoke and a you know, characters can get away with the look over there and taking off kind of thing because it's cartoon rules. If, you know, Bugs Bunny would get away with it, characters in this world will too. So they're investigating something down in the dungeons. They're actually using D&D, but a homebrew spin of it. So all the combat rules and all that stuff is D&D, but the characters are all individually generated. So they should have fun. I'm curious to see how it goes. They're doing it entirely on Discord and then recording it so it can be put into a podcast later. The Offspring has been listening to this podcast for a couple of months, I think now. Really liked it and started getting involved with the folks on Discord with it. And for the first time, they're going to be able to play DM into this with this group that they have been listening to. So they're kind of excited. I mean, for those who are more, you know, into the big time stuff, it's kind of like playing in Critical Role. They don't do video because they're all in different places. It's all on Discord, but it's the same idea. This is a smaller version, but they're really excited about it. So that's awesome. Hostility. What was hostility? That is amazing. I love the old style Merry melody. Wow. I'm going to allow that. Barbarossa, it held loony. So I have added loony to the acceptable terms, especially if it's capitalized. Apparently loony is considered hostile. Maui the Helper will learn. All right, so that is the region. Now, I said that my base map was a work in progress. Here's what I do to now make the base map reflect what I've done with these regions. So on the base map, I don't need the tectonic lines because I already have them there. I don't need the region lines because I don't have them there. So I'll turn off the region. Oops. Turn off the region. Actually, I can turn off the legend and the label because those don't need to be in the master map. I already have it. I already have the 1,000 miles in the master map. I said turn off regions. There we go. I can turn off tectonic lines. So what does that leave me? Well, that just leaves me the region.
Donna says it's dinner time.
And there we go. Turn off. It'll get there. That wasn't it. Where did I leave it? Where did I put that? I have lost a ridge. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this leaves me with basically the coloring I did and the mountains. So what I do is I select the mountains and the coloring. That's it. Whoops. And I copy those. Now I go back. I can zoom in on this area. That's the area I just worked on, if you recall. I hit this, paste. You can see it's massive because you remember I tripled it in size. And now I can select those three. Just like that, I can actually group them together so they all size simultaneously. Size it back down. And just a little bit of tinkering. That's my region. Now I've added the detail to that region. And once I add in the other regions that I have detailed, you can now see how they are and how it starts to fill out the detail of the world. That's how it works. That's how I've done it. Gang, Mrs. Kahuna is downstairs saying, "It's dinner time!" So I gotta go. She's about to yell like she just did. So I gotta get going. I'm hoping that was helpful to you. If you got any questions, jump on into my Discord channel, or meet me tomorrow in Kahuna Quiet. I'll be there. And I want to say who's up right now. Is Roll Society up? Who's up? Do we know? Bueller? 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 Anyone? I'll try sending it over to Roll Society there. I want to raid somebody. All right, so we're going to raid Roll Society if they're there. All right, we're going to go. All right, you guys. Thank you for a fun stream. Hope you got something out of this. If you got any questions, shoot them into my Discord or come by on Kahuna Quiet tomorrow. I'll be glad to answer it. Oh, and Harold is up. I've already got the raid going. All right, well, let me go ahead and set the raid to Roll Society. Oh, I can cancel it, actually. Harold's table, right? All right, let me change it over to Harold's table. Raid Harold's table. There we go. All right, so we're going over to Harold's table. Give him a big aloha. Like I said, hope it was helpful. If you got any questions, Discord or Kahuna Quiet, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a great night.